In Peter Jackson's films, we are shown that Saruman has turned from Team Good to Team Mordor right from his first appearance. And throughout the rest of the trilogy, he is generally considered the chief lieutenant of Sauron. In the Lord of the Rings books, it's honestly much the same. Saruman appears to be mostly working with Mordor, completely working against the free peoples of Middle-earth, and definitely a force of evil that our heroes must overcome. But what if I told you that Saruman was fighting for the good all along, and that his motivations and goals were generally the same as, say, Gandalf or Elrond? Of course, he was willing to do cruel and terrible things, but is it possible that his overall objectives and hopes were essentially the same as our heroes? In this video, I would like to explore this question. Was Saruman secretly fighting for the side of good all along? Well, welcome to our channel. Here we discuss interesting topics and lore surrounding Middle-earth. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider liking this video or even subscribing. Thanks. Okay, let's dive in. Could Saruman have been fighting for good all along? Well, to answer this question, I think we first need to start at the beginning. Who, or rather what, was Saruman? Saruman was one of the eternal gods of the earth. The leaders and greatest of these gods were known as the Valar, and the rest of the gods were called the Maiar. Saruman was one of the Maiar, and one of the mightiest. For example, when the elves first appeared in Middle-earth by the Bay of Cunavinian, they were in great danger from Morgoth. Saruman was one of the six, amongst all of the Maiar, that were chosen to travel to Middle-earth and protect the young elves, until they could eventually move to Valinor to live with the gods. I think Saruman was probably the god of physics, of deep scientific learning. He was arguably the most intelligent of all the gods, and skilled at all intellectual pursuits. I also view him as something of an overachiever. He was the type of person that is always top of his class, scores an A+ on every assignment, and yet still does all of the extra credit. Perhaps his greatest flaw was the original sin: pride. He was quite proud. You see, it was important to him that others respected and acknowledged both his achievements and his intelligence, and he seemed to have a great need to receive accolades from the other gods. But these traits motivated him to do many good and great things, and on their own were not particularly negative. He was intelligent, he was driven, he was successful, and for thousands of years, he was a force for good. During the Third Age of this world, the Valar foresaw that Sauron would rise again, and this time, the free peoples of Middle-earth would be hard-pressed to resist him. Most of the elves had left Middle-earth and sailed to Valinor, and the Númenóreans were all but extinct. And so the Valar called a great council, where they discussed long how to best aid Middle-earth. In the end, it was decided that they would send emissaries of the gods to Middle-earth. They would be clothed in human form and forego might or power, but instead work as organizers of the resistance against Sauron. They would have to be impressively great Maiar to attempt such an endeavor. But who should they send? Well, Saruman. They sent Saruman. He volunteered, and the Valar agreed that he was the logical choice. He knew Sauron well, was learned in most of the same types of subject matters as Sauron, and was confident that he would be successful. He was chosen to be the leader of a small team of Maiar that would travel to Middle-earth and organize the resistance against Mordor. In short, Saruman was the champion of the gods, and it was his job to defeat Sauron once and for all. In Saruman's mind, I think he thought he would simply outsmart Sauron, organize his downfall, and return to Valinor to hear the cheers and praise of his peers. I imagine it very much appealed to his pride and desire for recognition from others, and he certainly enjoyed being the supervisor or leader of the other Maiar. But there was one problem: Gandalf. You see, the gods also chose Gandalf to be an emissary to Middle-earth, but he was not to be specifically on Saruman's team or under his charge. Instead, they chose him as an independent of sorts, a second set of eyes and ideas to work against Mordor. A backup plan, perhaps, should Saruman's team not succeed or need help. To put it bluntly, Saruman was insulted. He was insulted that the Valar would suggest that he needed help, and even more insulted that this help would come in the form of Gandalf, a Maiar that he felt was beneath him. They traveled to Middle-earth and for a long while worked together to defeat the threat of Mordor. But deep down, Saruman resented Gandalf. He would often put down Gandalf's ideas in public and demean him, hoping that others would then view himself as more wise by comparison. The fact that Gandalf was humble and did not view their relationship competitively only angered Saruman all the more. In time, he came to wish that Gandalf would fail, and that he could succeed without Gandalf's help, to prove his own superiority in the eyes of the other gods. Eventually, the leaders of Middle-earth formed the White Council to counter the threat of Sauron returning. Its members included Saruman and Gandalf, Elrond and Galadriel. The initial plan was straightforward: watch for the signs of Sauron returning and attack him before he grows strong, while he is still weak and frail. In the meantime, Saruman would study all of the knowledge of ring-making to better understand their enemy. It's in his study of the One Ring that Saruman developed a new plan, a new way to defeat Sauron. If Saruman were to find the One Ring and take it for himself, he reasoned he could personally overthrow Sauron, and would show that he did not need the aid of Gandalf, or anyone else for that matter. He reasoned he would be honored and praised in Valinor and well respected. With the One Ring, he would also have the power to order and structure the earth, to turn it into a more perfect world. It's essentially the extra credit, not only defeating Sauron, but also fixing Middle-earth at the same time. But he kept these ideas a secret, known only to himself. In public, he supported the White Council, and if they were to succeed, he knew that he would still be seen as the leader that accomplished a great endeavor. So if he gets the ring, or the White Council wins the day, either way the outcome would be positive for him. Either way, he was accomplishing the task that the gods had given him. And either way, good was triumphing over evil. So you see, while Saruman might not have been fully supporting Gandalf and Elrond and Galadriel, he was nevertheless still working to accomplish the same goal of saving Middle-earth and defeating the evil of Sauron. Later in the narrative, Saruman is directly confronted with Sauron through the use of the Palantir. The Palantir is a crystal ball of sorts that allows people to communicate with each other over great distances. Essentially Middle-earth's version of FaceTime. During this encounter over the Palantir, Saruman pledges to work with Sauron. True. But it's a trick. It's not real. It's not genuine. Unlike in the films, Saruman was never truly aligned with Mordor and only pretended to work with them. He reasoned that by feigning allegiance to Sauron, he would hedge his bets. If somehow Sauron won the day, Saruman would be rewarded and given a place of command in Mordor's new world. In time, he would find a way to outsmart Sauron and take the ring, and again would be successful. In this way, no matter the outcome of the coming War of the Ring, Saruman would be able to complete his task, save all of Middle-earth, and return to Valinor as a hero. You see, while his methods are misguided and his motivations ultimately self-centered, he is still fighting the good fight. At the end of Fellowship, we witness orcs and Uruk-hai attack our heroes near the waterfall at Hineth-Anun. Merry and Pippin are captured, but notice what happens next. They are not taken to Mordor, but instead to the west, to Isengard. But why? Well, Saruman thinks he's captured Frodo and Sam, and he thinks that they have the ring. You see, he's not working for Mordor. He's not sending them to Sauron as was agreed. No, instead, he's taking the ring for himself, so that he can save Middle-earth and defeat the great evil of Sauron. Once Merry and Pippin escape during a Rohirrim raid, Saruman unleashes his ruthless Uruk-hai to attack Rohan at Helm's Deep. In the films, we hear that this is Mordor's army, built for them, and that they want to destroy the world of men. But in reality, it's Saruman's army, and he doesn't attack Helm's Deep to destroy men. Quite the opposite, in fact. He logically assumes that Aragorn and Gandalf have taken the hobbits to Helm's Deep to protect the ring. He's not fighting to kill men, but ultimately to save them. He's attacking the Hornburg to capture the ring and use it to save Middle-earth and defeat the great evil of Sauron. The Lord of the Rings is written from the perspective of Bilbo and Frodo. They're the ones actually writing the story. It's essentially their journal or diary. While they would seem to be fairly reliable narrators, Frodo more than Bilbo for sure, they are still telling the story from their own perspective. As Saruman is an adversary to their friends and comrades, they assume he is with the enemy. But a person can be against you and still fighting for good, just in a different way. And I think this is the real story of Saruman. In the end, however, after Saruman was shown to be a traitor to all sides, and the ring and Sauron were destroyed, Saruman lost his purpose, and with that, he lost his way. He abandoned any semblance of good and attempted to ruin and corrupt the Shire purely out of spite. In the scourging of the Shire, he pollutes the waters, rips out the trees, and steals away the hobbits' sense of innocence. He had grown bitter and mean and ugly, and at last had truly fallen from grace. In the end, it cost him his life. And as his body fell, we hear this from the hand of Frodo. About the body of Saruman a grey mist gathered, and rising slowly to a great height like smoke from a fire. As a pale shrouded figure it loomed over the hill. For a moment, It wavered, looking to the west. But out of the west came a cold wind and blew it away, and with a sigh dissolved into nothing. You see, even in the end, Saruman, with all his flaws, looked to the west towards Valinor, hoping to find pity or forgiveness and be welcomed back home. But he found none.